The reason you haven't been able to completely overcome your lust up to this point, after many years and years and years of trying, is for one reason and one reason only. And that's because you don't actually know what lust is. How can you effectively fight against an enemy that you don't truly understand, right? So let's talk about what lust is. Let's really get your mind right on what lust really is so that you can better understand it and combat it effectively. Let me ask you a question first though. If I were to tell you right now, if I were to ask you, close your eyes and picture the word lust, not in letters and not just the word in itself, but what it means to you. If I were to tell you to try to imagine what lust is, looks like, and feels like, what would it actually appear like to you when you have your eyes closed? What do you see? Are you seeing maybe an attractive woman? Are you seeing a very attractive woman doing something in a provocative type of way? Are you looking at yourself with an attractive woman? Maybe you're thinking about lust as the urge you feel for an attractive woman or to be gratified by an attractive woman. If that's what you're picturing, if that's what you're seeing, if any of the things I just talked about is how you vaguely describe or think of lust as a concept, then I'm here to tell you that that's exactly why you've never been able to overcome lust, because you have the wrong misconception of what lust is. Lust is not an urge. Lust is not this pulling you have towards women. That is a massive misconception. Lust is simply one of the 7 deadly sins. And you have to understand what a deadly sin is first in order to understand what lust is. So what are the 7 deadly sins? The 7 deadly sins are essentially transgressions against natural law. Things that you do that put you in direct opposition to the natural laws of the universe. Basically, in committing any of these universal crimes, if you want to think about them like that, you get backlash, you get punished, you have committed a sin, you have transgressed against the algorithm of this universe. And there's a price to pay for that, right? So what are the 7 deadly sins? There's quite a few, right? There's lust itself, there's greed, there's envy, there's wrath, there's sloth. All these 7 deadly sins are really just one sin. There is no 7 deadly sins. There's only ever been one deadly sin. The reason that we mention them as 7 different deadly sins is because that one deadly sin has 7 major ways of manifesting itself through us. Now, what exactly is that one major sin? That sin is called a lack of self-control. It's the only sin in existence that you actually need to worry about, and it's the only one that is deadly, right? It's the most deadly sin by far, okay? A lack of self-control. That is the ultimate sin. That is the ultimate transgression against God, against the algorithm of the universe, against yourself. You betray yourself to the highest of magnitudes when you lose any control over yourself, when you allow your bodily urges to take over and your emotions to run wild, and you practice absolutely no discipline at all. That is the only deadly sin. And the 7 different deadly sins are really just the 7 major ways that it manifests in our actions, behaviors, and decision makings as human beings. So for instance, gluttony. Gluttony is a lack of self-control, but around food specifically, right? Being hungry is okay. Wanting food is okay. Food is wonderful. Food is an amazing thing. Food is for fuel. Fuel is not bad. But when you overindulge in food in a way where you have zero self-control around it, to the point where the food and the urge you have for more food begins to control your emotions, your daily habits, your decision making, that's when it becomes gluttony. Envy. Envy is a lack of self-control around your ability to compare yourself to others in a healthy way. Sloth is a lack of self-control around rest and recovery. Resting and recovery are fine, but when you overindulge in it, especially when it's undeserving, now it's sloth. Now it's a deadly sin. Being angry is okay. There's a lot of things to be pissed off for. And there's a lot of good reasons to be angry for. Nothing wrong with that. Nothing wrong with showing a bit of negative emotion in a certain few directions. It's when you allow that anger to begin to control you, your actions, your emotions, your decision making, that it becomes wrath. That's a problem. Now take that exact kind of thinking and point it towards lust. Lust in itself is not the urge to want a woman. It's okay to do that. It's okay to want to be with a woman sexually, or to, find women sexually attractive, or to want to get naked with women. All those things. That's nice. That's normal. That's fine. You were created that way. It's okay. What's not normal, what's wrong, what's immoral, if you want to go into morality, is when you allow that urge you feel for a woman to begin to dictate your entire existence. And that right there is the point of what lust really is. Lust is not the urge to be with a woman, because that urge in itself is natural. That urge to want to be sexually gratified by a woman, to want to be touched, to want to be loved, to want to be with a woman in that way, that animalistic pull you have towards the activities involved in reproduction, that's normal. That's okay. That is by design. What's not normal, what's not good, is when you allow that urge to control you. That's when it becomes lust. That's when it becomes a deadly sin. All right? I've always said since the beginning of my entire channel, please, 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 do not allow women to become your primary focus in life. That is not the point. And I'm saying that as someone who literally has made an entire business out of teaching men how to interact with and relate themselves better to women. Even I don't make women my ultimate priority in life, even though it would look like it. No, I do not. Women, as a creature, by design, punish you when you try to make them your ultimate priority and number one goal in life. Whenever you allow your need for a woman to supersede anything and everything else in your life, that is the ultimate deadly sin. That is something worth and worthy of you getting ultimately punished for. And you will get punished. Oh yes. Women, you see, like I said, by biological design, they know to sniff out a man that prioritizes them over everything, and to unapologetically make that man suffer every single time. Right? So the punishment for lust isn't just a lack of motivation or a massive distraction from your actual ultimate purposes and goals in life or anything like that. The ultimate punishment for lust is that in trying to appease yourself, in trying to satisfy said lust, you never can. Because when women smell that you have a lust for them in that way, they know how to back the fuck away from you. And they will run in the opposite direction a lot faster than you can catch up to them. Right? So that's really what lust is. Lust is not the urge itself. Lust is when you allow the urge to control you. That is when things go wrong. So now that we understand that that's what lust is, and lust is just something that keeps showing up in different aspects of your life, and you don't know how to get a grip on it, here's how you deal with lust correctly. Because now we know it's not the urge itself, it's your inability to control it. How do you control this urge of lust? I'll tell you. Quite simple. The best way I found to deal with lust, and the way I truly believe in it has worked for me in my personal life and the lives of my students, is the law of overexposure. Now, this is the exact opposite advice that I feel like most people out there would give. Most people would say, in order to control your lust, stay as far away from women as possible. That's not the case. That's not what you want to do. If anything, the more you stay away from women, the longer you stay away from women, the more power you give to them. The more power you give the urge you have for them, because you're pedestalizing it more, right? It's like the person that quits alcohol and replaces that addiction to alcohol with never missing an AA meeting. It's like, yeah, one addiction is better than the other, but at what point you go living your life without thinking about alcohol at all? You see the point? If you have to go from indulging in alcohol every single day to indulging in AA meetings every day, your life still revolves around alcohol. You just went from drinking it to talking about it. See, the point isn't to completely try to remove yourself from it, because that just creates more unhealthy attachments to it. What you should do is get yourself enough around women, understand them, relate yourself better to them, learn how to communicate with them effectively so that you can see for yourself that they're not worth revolving your life around for. They're not worth it. Women are not made, they're not designed to be your ultimate priority. They just are not. But you won't know that, and you won't be able to truly internalize that until and unless you get yourself around them. You expose yourself to them consciously and as often as possible. When you allow yourself to be exposed to any kind of gratification out there in a way that you have control over, all of a sudden that particular kind of gratification or pleasure or enjoyment no longer has control over you. Because here's the thing, what makes any sin a deadly sin, like we said before, is a lack of self-control, right? The urge itself is never evil inherently. It's never intrinsically bad. What makes it evil is your inability to relate yourself correctly to it, aka a lack of self-control. So if you can find a way to actually relate yourself to it correctly without overindulging every single time to the point where you no longer have control over how you indulge in the gratification of these urges, then all of a sudden you're not committing any sins. And as a result, you're not gonna be punished later for it. Not by any cosmic entity or by your own unconscious mind, right? So my own personal experience has shown me, and not just my own personal experience, what I have seen work for all my students, is that when you allow yourself to become so inundated with the abundance of that gratification around you, you no longer see it as something so much more important than yourself that you have to pedestalize it, right? Take food, for example. I grew up in Nigeria. I grew up in very unique circumstances, and there were times where we were so poor, we didn't even know what we were gonna eat the very next day. Like, it was that bad, right? Here's what I noticed, a very peculiar thing I noticed about those times. Whenever we were running low and there wasn't as much around us, the abundance wasn't there, it was a time of lack, a time of famine in our lives, food became the number one biggest focus for us. It was like all we could do was think about where our next meal would come from. I would try to plan ways to go to different places and sneak into different establishments to eat food, or find a way to crash different parties where they were sharing food, or just try to visit a friend's house. Hopefully the mom or dad offers to feed us for lunch, something like that, right? Just to find a way to get food, just to find a way to survive. But whenever the pantry was full of food, it was almost like you could go 2-3 days without remembering to eat. How interesting is that? When you lack it, all you can do is think about it. When you have it, it never crosses your mind. And the same thing applies to women. You see, when you have no abundance in women in your life, all you can ever think about is women. Not having women, all the rejections you receive become magnified in your head, amplified almost. Everything surrounding or concerning women becomes more of a greater concern to you. But once you have women, it's almost like you don't care if they're there or not, right? How interesting is that? That in itself is called the law of overexposure. Once you expose yourself to it enough times, it's no longer a big deal to you. That is why I created stuff like the interview. I have an entire course where I go through the entire process of incorporating women into your life from the very first moment of meeting her, approach, all the way to getting her into bed. That way, when you have complete control over that process of what women you want to talk to, what women you choose to keep interacting with, vetting them properly so you know what women you actually want to keep in your life for any period of time, and then learning how to cycle them through an entirely predictable process that gets you the results you want with them every single time, you very quickly come to realize, yo, not only are women not that big a deal, but they're definitely not worth you changing your entire life or making some massive life-changing decisions to cater to them. They're just not that important. They shouldn't be. But again, you won't know that until you internalize these different mindsets and, more importantly, these different systems in place for getting them into your life whenever you want. The guy who can get a woman whenever he wants, get their attention, get their focus, get their validation whenever he wants, doesn't take women nearly as seriously as a guy who doesn't have the ability to. So if you're interested in actually having this ability and getting rid of your lust forever, I highly suggest you go down below to the description and click the link you see right there. Go and get the interview as soon as you possibly can. In the meantime though, go ahead and watch this video right here. All right? It'll help you to understand a little more about how you should reposition yourself in the dating world today. I'll see you next time. Until then, it's been Jason, favorite scientist. With all this information, what you must.